Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. We're jumping right into a really fascinating July 2026 white paper from IPE Services today. This paper does something pretty incredible. It takes two absolute titans of continuous improvement, Eliyahu Goldratt's theory of constraints and the IPE KIV-KPV-KOV architecture, and masterfully connects them. So if you've ever felt like your process improvement initiatives are either a bit too scattered or maybe they just lack deep, sustainable operational control, you are definitely in the right place. Let's kick things off with what I like to call the ultimate operations question. What is the single thing limiting your system right now? Honestly, identifying that one true bottleneck is the universal headache for business leaders and continuous improvement professionals everywhere. Because it doesn't matter if you're running a hospital, a massive steel mill, or a software development team. Something, somewhere, is holding you back.
Here's how we're going to break this down today. First, the weakest link. Second, TOC and the power of focus. Third, the IPE Universal Control Architecture. And finally, Convergence, how they're better together. Let's get to it.
All right, Section 1, the weakest link, diving into the theory of constraints.
You know, back in 1984, Eliyahu M. Goldratt dropped his absolutely groundbreaking book, The Goal. In it, he laid out this massive, simple premise. Any system is limited in achieving its goal by a small number of constraints. Now, if you work in operations, you likely know TOC inside and out. But this white paper frames it in a really fresh way. It treats an organization like a chain of interdependent processes. Think about it. Improving a process that isn't the constraint, it's basically a total waste of time and energy. It doesn't move the needle on your overall throughput. You're literally just creating a giant pileup right in front of the actual bottleneck. So the big question becomes, how do we actually manage that chain? Well, Goldratt nailed this down with the 5 focusing steps. It's this rapid, repeatable cycle. First up, you identify the limitation. Next, you exploit it, meaning you squeeze every ounce of performance out of it without dropping any capital. Third, you subordinate. You align every other process in the whole building just to support the constraint's pace. Step 4, elevate it. Now you invest to increase its capacity. And finally, step 5, repeat. Because, let's be real, once you break a constraint, a new one is going to pop up somewhere else almost immediately. The cycle never really stops.
Now, to make this cycle actually work, TOC brings some heavy-hitting diagnostic tools to the table. You've got logic tree tools, like the current reality tree, to trace those nasty, undesirable effects right back to a root cause. There's the evaporating cloud to surface hidden policy conflicts. And out on the actual production line, it uses drum buffer rope scheduling. This paces the entire line to the constraint. It's literally like the constraint is a drum, beating out the rhythm for the entire factory.
But, and this is a big but, the white paper points out exactly where this model hits a wall. TOC tells an organization where to focus, but not necessarily how to redesign every process. It's deliberately narrow by design. Like, it hands you these fantastic logic trees, right? But it doesn't give you a standard process taxonomy or a built-in mechanism for cascading input to output control below the constraint itself. It tells you exactly where the fire is burning, but translating that into day-to-day shop floor variables, well, that's entirely on you.
Which brings us to Section 2. IPC, the Universal Controls Architecture, or as I think of it, the comprehensive grid.
Rooted in Roger Slater's foundational work from way back in 1996, the Integrated Process Excellence Framework, or IPE, operates completely differently. It acts less like a targeted laser beam and way more like a universal system floodlight. It's a whole different paradigm for process control. IPE organizes cause and effect reasoning across this standard 6-step deployment framework. It applies a really rigorous hierarchy to every single process, breaking things down from a broad 1.0 area to a 1.1 activity, all the way down to a super granular 1.1.1 element level. And the real kicker here? It applies this massive structure to every element, regardless of whether that process is currently the constraint or not.
Let's look at the first tier of this internal architecture, key input variables, or KIVs. The framework meticulously defines the exact upstream conditions and resources that must be fed into a process before the work even starts. We're talking materials, exact specs, information, and even human or equipment readiness. It's like having the ultimate recipe. You got to know exactly what ingredients you need before you turn on the stove.
Moving down to the second tier, we find the key process variables, the KPVs. These are your in-process parameters. Basically, they're the real-time control points mediating between your inputs and your desired outcomes. They're what ensure the process is actually running smoothly while the physical work is happening on the floor. Think of KPVs as the active steering wheel of your entire operation. And finally, we hit the third tier, key output variables, or KOVs. This is where you tie those inputs and processes directly to the resulting quality, cost, delivery, and performance metrics. These are the hard numbers leadership actually uses to judge if a process is in control. Plus, they link directly back to the business scorecards through master KPI mapping tables, so it beautifully closes the loop. To give you a sense of the sheer scale and real-world application of IPE, get this number, 81. There are currently 81 sector-specific IPE packs available out there. These things are pre-populated with those exact KIV, KPV, and KOV variables for industries ranging from healthcare to steel to pharma manufacturing. It is just this incredible, massive repository of pre-built, sector-tested standard work. All right, Section 3. Let's look at convergence and differentiation. How do these two frameworks actually go head-to-head on the shop floor? So we've got TOC pointing this intense laser, and IPE flooding the whole system with light. Are they rivals? Actually, no. First off, they converge heavily on one massive core belief. Both TOC and IPE entirely, 100%, reject blind local optimization. They are completely aligned that sustainable improvement has to follow rigorous cause and effect logic. Optimizing local elements just to keep people busy or just for the sake of activity, totally discouraged by both camps. You don't just put a Band-Aid on a symptom, you dig down and find the true driver.
That said, when you look at scope and metrics, they vastly differ. TOC is a highly selective prioritization philosophy. It deliberately focuses only on the current constraint. IPE, on the flip side, is a comprehensive coverage architecture. It covers absolutely every element. And for metrics, TOC is looking at system-level financial flows, like throughput and inventory. IPE is focused on those sector-specific KOVs tied right to industry mapping tables for quality, cost, and delivery.
Now, this fundamental difference becomes glaringly obvious when we ask one simple question. What happens when the current bottleneck is finally fixed and the constraint shifts? Because as TOC's Step 5 pretty much guarantees, it will shift. The second you elevate a constraint, the limitation just packs its bags and moves somewhere else in your chain.
And here is the harsh reality of that shift. Under pure TOC, when that bottleneck moves, you might find yourself starting from scratch, staring at a blank current reality tree, just to figure out how to manage the new problem. But with IPE, the receiving process already has a fully defined KIV-KPV-KOV structure lying in wait. It's totally ready to manage the new load. You don't have to rebuild control from the ground up every single time.
Which brings us to our final section, number 4, Convergence, Better Together, the ultimate synthesis. The really brilliant takeaway from this white paper is that you absolutely do not have to choose between these two approaches. They're like perfectly complementary puzzle pieces. TOC supplies where to focus, and IPE supplies how to control it. Organizations can use TOC's 5 focusing steps to figure out exactly where to point their limited improvement resources this quarter. And then they seamlessly layer that IPE hierarchy right over that specific constraint to provide the standard work, the control points, and the named ownership needed to actually exploit and elevate it. It's just a perfect match. So I want to leave you with this final thought to really evaluate your own continuous improvement program. When your current constraint breaks and a new one emerges, because we know it will you be starting from scratch, or will your system be ready? When the dust settles and tomorrow's bottleneck reveals itself, are you going to be scrambling to map the process, or will your comprehensive architecture already be lying in wait? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this synthesis gives you a powerful new way to look at process control in your own organization. Catch you next time.